Hi, guys. In this episode of Chats, we speak with a high level practitioner of a very rare style of Kung Fu here in South Florida, known as Lung Ying, dragon boxing. He has been training in it for over a decade and looks to further his ties with the family that teaches him. A lifelong martial artist, he has practiced many styles before choosing dragon boxing as his main martial pursuit. A web designer by day and kung fu enthusiast slash teacher by night. He's always trying to improve himself through the martial path. Please welcome Sihing Dayne DiGuglielmo. How are you doing today, man?
Thanks for having me, Mark. It's good to see you and good to talk to you.
All right, so let's just go ahead and get straight into this interview, man. All right. How do you get started in the martial arts, Dayne?
It's a funny story, actually. I was 4. And, most people started a little later, but my mom thought it was a good idea to get me started young. And she took me to the school, George Elmer's school, actually. It's a Kempo school in New Jersey. And he didn't want to teach me. He said, "You're too young. Come back 5 or 6. My mom begged him. She said, "Oh, please, please, please. He'll be good. He'll be disciplined." Well, if you ask George, he may remember me as his least disciplined student in the beginning. And from 4 years old onward under him, it was push-ups and discipline, and that's where my discipline actually started, was Kempo karate. So I have to give that credit to that. So I kind of practiced that for a few years in my childhood. But later, when I joined the military, I joined the Navy actually right after high school. And that's when I was really introduced to Kung Fu. It wasn't really, I kind of didn't have the awareness that most people have of Kung Fu. Like a lot of people that I've met that practice Kung Fu, they talk about Bruce Lee, they talk about Jackie Chan, Jet Li, all these movies and inspirations and, maybe people they knew. But it wasn't really like that. I thought of karate, martial arts, all these things kind of separate. And I had no real vision of Kung Fu before the Navy. But when I was in boot camp, actually, we would work out after class. Like at the night when they tell you to go to bed, we would get up and we'd work out because, some guys were more competitive for certain things. And we were going out for like special warfare and things like that. So we would get up at night and do push-ups and pull-ups and all this stuff. And there was this one guy in the corner. He was from Arizona. I actually still talk to him on the internet every now and again. Devin Ayudo, so I'll just say his name. But he would be in the corner doing his Wing Chun punches. And I always thought, I was like, man, that looks cool. What is he doing? A couple of weeks into it, I made friends with him, and he started to teach me, actually. And that was my introduction to Wing Chun. My introduction to Kung Fu was chain punching and doing stepping drills and turning drills at boot camp when everyone was sleeping. So, as time went on, I thought about it more. And when I was separated from the Navy, finished, I went on and I looked for a school. I said, maybe not Wing Chun, maybe something else. Just I wanted a Kung Fu school, So I went to a school in New Jersey. At the time, it was called Shaolin Temple, New Jersey. It was really vague what they taught, And they did Wing Chun, they did Hung Gar, they did other strange styles, and I'm not even sure, the names of some of them at this point. I was kind of new then, so I didn't recognize everything. But they led me down the path to coming to a guy named Andy Masterson, and he was something else. He really introduced me to a level of Tai Chi that I hadn't seen again until I come down here to Florida. He started talking about things like structure and posture and principles of movement and like yin and yang and yielding and advancing. And, it's the more advanced, sophisticated principles of Tai Chi and Kung Fu. Obviously, when we say Tai Chi, Kung Fu, it's interchangeable to me in my perspective. Like, Tai Chi is a Kung Fu. It's just a higher level, different, slightly different interpretation. But in a sense, it's still a skill that you learn and achieve over a long period of time, right? So after I met Andy and I trained with him for a little while, I for some reason had to move down here. I don't know what was going on. I had a little bit of family down here. I liked Florida because I was in the Navy here, and I decided to move down to South Florida. And when I come down here, I didn't know who to train with. So I always remember talking to him on the phone, like, hey, how do I find someone like you? How do I find someone that has these things? And he's like, oh man, you'll figure it out. He's a classic, like, Kung Fu koan, like, you'll figure it out. You know what you want, you'll figure it out. And, I kind of went through the journey a little bit. It's actually, I met like Lee Seo Hung in Lee Kun Hung School. That's where you and I had met. So it was a bit of a journey for a little while before I found my way back to the Haka arts. It was probably 2013 or 2014. I actually journeyed over to Andy Chung School, and that was when he was over in FeiYue commercial, and that was like the Kung Fu school I was looking for at that time. I walked in, they were doing Wing Chun, they were doing Lung Ying, they were doing Bak Mei, they were doing Southern Praying Mantis, all the cool stuff that I had grown appreciation for over the years of practicing the different Kung Fu, in New Jersey, and then doing Choi Lei Foot down here for a little while. It was kind of everything in one place. The problem with that is traditionally speaking, people think of martial arts, they think of discipline, they think of one system, this, then this, then this, then this, then this, and it's kind of like a structure, and you're learning in a particular order. But his school wasn't always really like that. I think for me it was good, for other people not so good, but for me, I'm coming in with those years of experience. So I come in and I see, the style of the week. Well, I'm all about style of the week. I'm like, Kung Fu mixed martial artist. I like it all. I'm about the Tai Chi, I'm about the Kung Fu. And it's kind of funny, actually, because he didn't really do very good advertising. I went in there because I wanted to learn more Tai Chi. I heard that he was a good Tai Chi guy, and I found the advertisement for Tai Chi. I went in there, learned that. But come to find out, he was doing all that other stuff. So, the last, 10 or so years with him has been an experience, and I think a lot of people that have trained with him, are reluctant to say that, but to talk about it. But, I think in general, the skill level that he has and the skill level that he can bestow upon his students is worthwhile. It's just that, with that comes a lot of other things. And when you're talking about a system that's not organized and it's not progressive, it's challenging for people, especially beginners, especially people that, aren't used to that way of learning. It's kind of what I understand as the old school way, where you just kind of pick up what works for you and you practice it, you get better. The teacher maybe gives you more, maybe doesn't, maybe you venture off somewhere else. I mean, I think it's sort of a modern idea that you should just go to one school. Like the misnomer here in the West of Kung Fu, that we should just practice under one teacher. Like, I think that maybe it was like that historically, but if you look at all the best masters, you look at all the masters that are famous, right? Maybe not someone like Yip Man, because his story's on television and all that stuff, but you look at people like Yun Kei, for example, from Wing Chun, or you look at Lam Yu Guai from the Lung Ying system, or you look at Chung Lai Chun from the Bak Mei system. All of them were mixed martial artists of their time. They were practicing different styles, different lineages, different branches of the same style. Or, Yun Kei, for example, maybe he did a lot of Wing Chun, but he also went to every family he could get in contact with. You look at the Chun Lai Chun, the Bak Mei system. He was a master of 5 systems before he even learned Bak Mei. So I'm exaggerating. I don't know the exact number, but these people were masters before they were masters, right? And I think that the modern kind of misnomer of Kung Fu specifically, I mean, obviously this is not a problem in mixed martial arts or, maybe some other systems, but it's definitely a problem in Kung Fu is that some of these teachers, maybe it's the teachers, maybe it's the students, I really don't know, put a monopoly on the student where going to another school is kind of frowned upon, or cross-training is frowned upon. And I don't think that's a good thing. I think that the facilitation of becoming a good martial artist is cross-training, is, your physical fitness, is cross-training other styles of martial arts, also cross-training in different ranges, right? Like if you're striking infighting with, Wing Chun, Lung Ying, Bak Mei, maybe you want to practice distance fighting a little more with karate or choi lei foot or long fist or something like that. Or, even to the perspective of to the ground where you're wrestling or Brazilian jiu-jitsu, techniques like that. We're talking about different ranges of combat, right? Like there's benefit in practicing all of these things, but there's also benefit in practicing variations of the same range. So I think that, my message there to people is to cross-train. In my experience through the years is cross-training. And what I learned from, the Sifu I spent the most time with is cross-training has great advantages. So moving into your next question, if you like. I'll just
well said. Well said. Okay, so from all the styles that you have practiced, right? Starting from in the beginning with Kempo, going all the way down to Lung Ying that you're practicing now, right? What are some similarities or differences, either one that you'd like to highlight between them?
All right, yeah. It's kind of funny. I think when you're talking about the similarities, it's fairly easy because the systems that I favor are Hakka systems. So there's a lot of similarities. The similarities in the hands, the Wing Chun hands, the Biel Sao, elbow principle, elbow being in, shoulders drop, the way that the angles and the rotation occur is very similar through all the Hakka systems. So similar. Maybe I have a 50-50 stance, maybe I have a 70-30 stance, but the footwork patterns are still the same. You're talking about shovel step, big bow. You're talking about the circle step, like the triangle crescent step, for example. You still see, your T-step here and there, but it's like, it's not just your traditional Kung Fu stances. Like, obviously, you'll see your horse stance, your front stance, your corner front stance, and your empty stance and all those things. But what shows you more of the similarities is the way the movements are, right? And the range that they fight in. When we see these Hakka systems, they're often specialized in infighting. In the range closer, like a bit closer. It's not quite grappling range, but it's not quite punching, kicking range. It's a little closer. It allows you to control a movement too. So it's like, you think about when you see these Brazilian jiu-jitsu guys or the wrestlers, they do hand fighting. They start with the hands and then they try to go for the shoulder, go for the neck. It's a bridge range. We call it in Kung Fu. We call that bridge. Once that hand crosses, once the hand touches, we call that bridge range. To me, I think of bridge as infighting. Once the bridge is made, now we're infighting. Before that, before I make a bridge, I have distance to cover. I have, some gap between you and me or me and my opponent before I make contact, before my bridge techniques begin to work. So it now brings me to my differences, where if I'm doing something like Kempo, or maybe not Kempo is the best example because Kempo has a lot of Southern Kung Fu influence. But say, for example, Shotokan, I practiced this with a friend, Six Dan, shout out to Dean. The distance fighting really makes a difference, right? So the contrast of other styles like karate, say choi lei foot. Choi lei foot for me always felt like a distance style. Maybe you can make the argument that it's not as much distance as some other styles, but to me it feels like distance compared to like Wing Chun or Bak Mei, Lung Ying. They feel a little closer than choi lei foot feels to me. But there's no bridge. You're kicking, you're punching. When there's bridge, you're trapping, controlling, chi sao, push hands, grappling. Transitioning between those things. That's another misnomer too, right? Is that like fights are like one thing, right? Like it's a very dynamic situation. It can go very quickly from a boxing match or a kickboxing match to a grappling or a wrestling match or rolling around on the ground jiu-jitsu style very quickly. There's a saying I always like to say, and I don't remember who I got it from. It wasn't me. I didn't make it up, so don't give me the credit. But they say that 90% of fights end up on the ground. But I always say that 100% of them start on your feet. So unless it's one of those funny jujitsu things where they crawl in on their back to, start their ground fighting, which, the jujitsu meme, it's real funny, everybody laughs about. Every fight, every encounter that you'll basically have will start on your feet. So it either is going to start at that kicking punching range or it's going to start at that bridging range, depending on the situation. But that's why I think it's important not to kind of just train one particular system or one particular style that only focuses on a particular range. And I think, leading into your earlier mention of why I pick Lung Ying as my favorite, that's why I pick Lung Ying as my favorite. I find it's the most dynamic in terms of the martial arts that I practice. Kung Fu, Tai Chi, whatever. Tai Chi is probably still, my overall favorite. But Lung Ying for the last decade or so has really been my greatest influence in terms of martial arts and martial application. It can adjust dynamically in most situations. It has the ability to take you from that bridge range into grapple range and even into the ground. It's not necessarily a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu on the ground, but you get ground control with your knees, with your forearms, and those techniques. There's a heavy influence. There's a heavy effort in bone conditioning in Lung Ying, Southern Dragon style for people that don't know what Lung Ying. The bone conditioning in the forearms is essential. Like if you've ever seen the techniques, a lot of them, they're coming across the midline forearm strikes. People will mistake them for a hammer strike. Yeah, you could use it that way, but you think about the conditioning. When you're conditioning the bones here and the bones here, they're very effective. It's very effective in martial art. I don't want to, give too much of the secrets away, but you think about how we perceive a martial art and how it may actually be applied. Sometimes it's not so obvious. And I think that the sophistication in Lung Ying and also Bak Mei, because I feel like they're twin systems, synergistic systems. Maybe they're descendants of each other or share an ancestor system, or maybe they were just developed to work together. But to me, when I see them two together, the synergy is so obvious. The techniques are so similar. The patterns are similar. The energies are different, but the techniques are so similar. It's easy to flow from one to the other, and transition between the two energies is really, this is something you and I were talking about when we were training the other day. The transition between the energies really throws the opponent off. It's like that Bruce Lee in the movies when he starts to do the bounce. It's like before the bounce, it's like, oh, he's kind of stationary. But then he puts the bounce on and he really jacks, Chuck up in the movie. It's like, it's the switching of our calibration, because you think about any time you square up with someone, you square up with your opponent, there's a calibration period. We even see it in professional boxing, professional mixed martial arts, any of these, striking arts generally. You see the calibration period. They size each other up. They throw some feints. They flash a little bit. They throw some movements to see if you're going to react or not, to test the range, to test your range, to test your reaction to their reaction. And then they're calibrated. Then they go and they clash and they, that's the calibration period. But what happens when you switch your tempo? What happens when you switch your style, switch your stance? Now they've got to recalibrate again. So I think the synergy between the two systems, actually, I would say the synergy between all of the Hakka systems is so useful in that they were developed to be synergistic. I don't know the lineage, the history to say they were all like descendants of the same system or same family. I would say, from my research, a lot of them come from the 5 animal system, or whatever it's called nowadays. But that's not, doesn't really matter much to history. It's where we're at today. Where we're at today, we see these systems that were developed much earlier, actually. They were descendants of older systems, but they weren't made public until what, like the 1950s? Pak Mei, Lung Ying. Nobody really knew much about it, especially in the West, probably until the 1950s. Wing Chun may be a little older, but I don't know the development period of any of them that anyone could say accurate. It's just interesting to see the synergy between all of them. And then, like you said earlier, the differences between them, I don't think are as important as the difference between them and some of the other styles I learned. And like I said, that just comes back to range and distance. And like there was a quote from Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu ancestor, Maida, I believe his name was. And he talks about the mastery of martial arts. He talks about what it really means to be the best martial artist. And it means to be the best martial artist in the range you feel most comfortable. It's taking your opponent and bringing them to the range you're most comfortable, keeping them there and controlling them. You know, it's not always about defeating them with violence, right? Like we've learned that from O-sensei or someone like that from Aikido, or even from the principles of Tai Chi, where you can control someone without causing injury. Maybe there's not always the case, but that's the goal, right? Like the highest goal of martial art is control yourself, control your opponent, not necessarily to hurt, injure, or maim your opponent, right? Like obviously we learn those techniques, and that's part of it. And it's part of the history, you know, coming down from like, you know, feudal periods and periods of like warfare and things like that. But I think the highest level of it is control.
All right. Let's jump into our next question then, Sihing. All right. What do you personally believe is the hardest part of developing one's Kung Fu?
It's practice. I think everyone probably agree with me on that. It's practice. The word Kung Fu itself means practice, right? Like, I think that, you know, that's another misnomer in the West, that Kung Fu is synonymous with martial art. And in the East, they know that when you hear the word Kung Fu, I'm probably not even saying it correctly, right? Or the correct accent, but it means a skill, a great level of skill achieved over a period of time, right? It's something that you practiced for a long time and became very good at because of your effort. I think it generally denotes a masterfulness, right? Like that you're a master, or that you've mastered the craft, or that people respect your skill in that thing. A lot of times here in the West, we think about the title Sifu or master or things like that, and we think of that as like is some title that's been given to us for like a black belt, essentially, right? But I don't think that's even what it means. I think that when your teacher gives you that certificate that says you're Sifu, it means that he respects your skill. He respects your skill because you have the Kung Fu, right? Like you've practiced it all these years, you've developed your skill, and even your teacher recognizes it. So I think, you know, it's a short answer to your question. The hardest thing about any martial art, especially Kung Fu, is practice, is dedication, is doing it all those years to the point of where you recognize your mastery and other people recognize your mastery.
Awesome. Which brings us into the fourth question then, Sihing. Right? If you could teach the new generation of martial artists only one thing, philosophy, technique, either one, you choose, what would it be?
Tao Te Ching. That was one of the greatest pieces of philosophy I've ever gotten in my Kung Fu journey. If anyone hasn't gotten themselves a copy of the Tao Te Ching and they're interested in Kung Fu, they're interested in meditation, Zen, Taoism, Buddhism, Tai Chi, any of these things, they need to get a copy of the Tao Te Ching and read it and just think about it. It's not something to be read cover to cover. It's something that you read and you meditate on each passage. You meditate on each section. And you think about things in your life and how it applies. Because I think that the philosophy of the Tao Te Ching and the philosophy of Kung Fu are the same thing. I think that you can learn Kung Fu, you can become better at Kung Fu by understanding that philosophy, 100%. And if you want to take my answer a step further, you said a philosophy or a technique. I think in technique, push hands is probably one of the things in Kung Fu that I've seen through all the systems. I see similar to push hands that we see in Tai Chi. I see similar exercises in Lung Ying. I see similar exercises in Wing Chun. I see similar exercises in Bak Mei. I see similar exercises. They're not the same one for one as a push hands you would see on YouTube, so to speak, but the principles are there. We're talking about energy, direction, manipulation, movement of the center, movement of people's posture, whole body movement. And, I think whole body movement is something that is very critical to your Kung Fu being effective. And that's something that is underemphasized maybe in some other systems. But in, say, Tai Chi, push-ins or similar exercises, it becomes very apparent whether you have the whole body movement. It becomes very apparent whether you have a proper structure or whether you know how to yield and advance at the proper times for your martial art to be effective. It's true when they say to do it slow, you do it fast. Practice slow, practice fast. You see push hands slow. You see these chi sows, they see them slow. Do them fast, do them slow is all good, right? So I think a technique for everyone to practice, push hands, chi sows, and similar to that is really the gateway to our Kung Fu, I think.
Something sensitivity based.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. All right. Awesome. Good answers. A lot shorter than I thought it would be, but it's very short and straight to the point. I like it.
I feel like if I'm not short, then I talk too much.
No. Don't think that way. It's just that I just never got that answer before in terms of technique, right? Something sensitivity based, and I like it. I'm taken aback, and I like that answer. All right, so let's go ahead and take it into that last one. Last question, right? How can you be contacted? Sihing.
I am on Gmail, daynediguglielmo@gmail.com. My name's probably in the title, so you could just email me there if you're interested.
All right, no problem. Just remember that, Sihing Dayne, he is a web designer by day and a Kung Fu enthusiast / sharer teacher, right, by night. All right. Of course, he is very knowledgeable in the Hakka martial arts as well. All right, so his contact information will be in the description below. Also in the description below will be a link for FeiYue shoes. If you need FeiYue shoes, go ahead and click that link. Get the best prices, the best deals, all at FeiYue shoes. Sihing Dayne, I want to thank you very much for this time that you've taken to drop some knowledge on us here about Lung Ying and the Hakka martial arts. Thank you very much.
Oh, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
All right, man. Take it easy. Thank you.